Thank you for tuning in to The Balancing Fact. I'm Angela Calais. I've been a full-time realtor for the past 16 years with 3 kids. Running a real estate brokerage, I work to dispel the myth that you cannot have a work-life balance when working in real estate. That balance looks different for everybody. Today, my guest is Kathryn Timpson. Kat is president of Women's Council of Realtors, North Central New Jersey, and an award-winning realtor and public speaker. In 2020, Kat pivoted to focus on real estate investments and commercial real estate, so created a partnership in Coldwell Banker Realty to help with those properties and projects. That partnership, TLo Property Solutions, is on track to do over $5 million in business in the first year. Kat is passionate about issues around diversity and inclusion, particularly for women. Recently, Kat has been speaking about the importance of women's financial literacy and the need for women's enhanced understanding of and participation in real estate as an asset class for investment. Kat has been seen in such national outlets as RentSpree and Authority Magazine, as well as been the guest on several national podcasts, including The Ambitious Woman, Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, and Self-Heal with Dr. Irene Cop. Kat has 2 grown children and lives in Summit, New Jersey. Kat has learned to step up her career organically while utilizing tools that make her most efficient for her business and for her clients. She has so much insight to share that every agent can benefit from. Good morning, Kat. Thanks for joining me today.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are you joining us from? Where are you based?
I am in Summit, New Jersey. We're about 15 miles outside of New York City, just due west.
Okay. All right. So what is the market like where you are? How are things shifting or changing, or are they still pretty crazy?
I wanted to giggle because our market is so crazy, but so is all relative, right? So last year during the summer, we had buyers out for residential properties who were putting bids as one of maybe 15, 20, 30 people. I think we're down to probably 15 and under in many of the areas, which seems like a cooling off. Of course, if you're a buyer, it's really still challenging. And it does vary a little bit by towns, but because we're so commuter dependent, that was an original reason we were so popular, but now we're sort of wonderfully between the option of being near to New York City, but if you're at home and you're telecommuting, then you don't need the city as much, but you still have access to it for anything else like social or any kind of work or opportunity. So it still is popular to have some response to the city, whether or not you're there full time or not.
Yeah. So are you seeing people moving from the city?
Yes, 1000%. People have been moving. So our area really started developing, not developing fully, but really getting going in 1998. A so-called Midtown direct train was put in from our area to Penn Station and also Hoboken, which are main lines from New York and out to New Jersey. And people really started to sort of say, hey, I really want the opportunity to work in New York, but I love the benefits of having a yard or my own property or my own space. It's never really stopped. The trend really continued. Of course, with COVID, it got even more heightened because people didn't want to pass anyone in the elevator anymore. They didn't want to be in the same building. They didn't want to have to mask up every time they walked in their door. So the idea of getting a home and giving your own space. And then, of course, other people wanted not only not to be with other neighbors that were that close. We wanted neighbors, but not right next door. They also wanted the opportunity to have some space within their own personal zone. So a room rather than just a corner, or an area where the kids could then do some schooling and it wasn't necessarily in the middle of the apartment. So that's been a lot of the push.
We're seeing a lot of that too now, where it's like, I thought this house would be perfect, but now that I work from home, I need another room, or I need an office, or I need another bedroom, or, something with just different layout. Even though everything else might have been perfect, they need different way that they use their space.
Oh, absolutely. And I think people have started to understand that. I think there was always sort of an interest in having maybe like, for lack of a better term, the man cave or
Right.
a den or something. But now you've got these various and sundry worlds going on where you have work, school,
Yeah.
recreation, off time, and they're all in the same environment. That makes for a very different kind of layout.
Yeah. And bigger houses. They're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And
Yeah, to
yeah.
some extent. And I don't know how for you guys, but a lot of people, certainly across the country that I know of and here, people are having generational lifestyles where they
Oh,
wouldn't
right.
have necessarily had their mom or dad live with them. But now families are saying, well, we could have a big house with some space for everyone if we
Hmm.
go in it together. So we're seeing
Yeah.
that. We're seeing people upsize, not just downsize. So it's really
Right.
interesting.
Yeah. It is really interesting. So how long have you been in the business now?
So I've been in technically in as an agent for 5 years,
Okay.
very almost six.
Yeah.
But when I first came out from New York City, a New Yorker myself, very hard to move to New Jersey, but fell in love with it. Moved
Yeah.
out, bought a house for 185,000. It was sort of everything we could do,
Sure.
and we ended up then renovating, buying, selling until we actually ended up 20 years later having had 5 homes of our own that we
Okay.
did something for and sold. So by the time I got into the market as an agent, I was already an experienced consumer.
Yeah.
So a little bit different. I sort of feel like there's a dog life, dog
Hmm.
years when you do work. But this was because I knew it backwards and forwards, had been the GC, had worked with contractors,
Yeah.
had done everything from ordering appliances to tamping down patios. So I really
Mhm.
knew the ins and outs. When people come to me as either buyers and sellers, I can say, listen, I
You've
get where
been
you're
there.
coming from.
Yeah. And so
Totally.
you've seen the market shift over the last 15 years from a consumer end rather than
Correct.
from the realtor end. So you're still familiar with how the demand has changed, the way, we search has changed. What I think consumers expect from their realtor has changed. And you've
So
seen that from both angles.
absolutely, from both sides. And honestly, and I say it only because this is my truth, is that I had a realtor that we worked with a lot. We had ended up having a very bad experience.
Mhm.
She had become very self-centered in what she wanted. New Jersey is a dual agency state, and we suffered from it.
Mm.
And so it took me a lot to actually even consider going into the industry. I loved houses. I loved working with people. I loved the whole process.
Mhm.
But for me, what I realized was I wanted to do it differently.
Yeah.
So that was sort of my making up for what wasn't working. And as a result, I think I've really had an enhanced understanding of what a truly good agent is. And it is also a combination of relationships with clients, relationships with other agents. That's a
Yeah.
big deal. And we can go into it, but that's a big deal. And then, of course, how the consumers come to the market. When we first came here, we had a realtor who had a 3-ring binder and
Oh,
went through
yeah.
pages. And now to think that we have people calling up, I had clients who called the other day and said, well, we saw something on realtor.com.
Mhm.
Great. I mean, they're just a different level of education in the consumer area, but
Yeah.
also there's levels of education they still need.
Oh, yeah.
And for all the people, I'm sure you have this, for all the people who think, I don't need an agent, I've got Zillow.
Mhm.
They haven't gone through the process to know
Mhm.
that there are so many aspects that still need to be negotiated.
Yep. They
I'm
don't know
still
what they don't know. Yeah. And
exactly
unfortunately, sometimes they find out the hard way.
the
And
hard
then they
way.
end up in a situation where like, I'm going to get into real estate just so I can do it different. So I can do it better than the person who
And here I
wronged
am,
me
right?
or yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. There was a mythology character named Cassandra, Greek mythology. I think she was one of the oracles, and she knew the truth, but was never believed. I feel
Mm.
like that often happens in real estate,
Yeah.
where we will tell somebody something, and they're like, "Sure," and you're
Yeah.
like,
You're just saying
"Okay."
that because, yeah.
Yeah, you're just
Mhm.
saying that because you want your commission. You're like,
Right. Totally.
well, and then the good news is when they figure it out, or when something happens and then they realize, wow, you're really telling me what I needed to know, or that came to fruition. And so maybe I should listen.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is you do encourage an even deeper relationship, because at that point,
Yeah.
they really do get what you're saying here out is in their best interest. And I'm a teammate. I never am telling people what to do, telling them how to spend their money. For me and my clients, we work as a team. So it's a discussion. It's, if they don't know something, let's educate you. And if
Mm-hmm.
you guys do know something, I honor that. Like, I'm not the know all be all. I'm
Right.
just here as your, literally as an agent, to
Yeah.
act in agency for you.
Right. Well, because the consumer's coming with their own experiences that they're working off of too. So I always say, you've always heard that story from your cousin or your friend or your uncle who's always had that bad experience, or maybe they have. So they kind of come with the knowledge of what they have. And then we're bringing it from another side of the knowledge that we have that they haven't seen. So melding that together. Do you have any types of systems in place that allow you to almost be proactive in getting to some of those um, like common things? So like I always feel like, okay, this seems to be a recurring um, thing that is happening over and over again. I'm going to put a system in place to just kind of nip this in the bud before it becomes an issue, because I see that it's becoming an issue more frequently. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
absolutely. Sort of
Yeah.
that frequently asked Q&A.
Yeah.
I'm actually in the process of translating that into video, because I
Yeah.
think so the process had been sort of, hey, this is the next step. This is what you can expect. Here are what you're going to go through. And it's all well and good on paper. And I think that's
Mhm.
been helpful. But I think when there's a discussion about it, or video to indicate what's coming next, sometimes what I've started to do, and I'm going to translate it all, is say, okay, you're at this point. Here's the next step. Here's the video, and you can refer to me, like refer to what I'm telling you is coming.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like being at a doctor's office, where if you're given bad news, it's so valuable to have somebody else there to have taken
Mhm.
notes and say, actually, what they said was, so people can refer back to it. I
Yes.
think there's value in
And,
having
oh, yeah, what did
something.
she say about that again? Let's take another look. Do you feel, because I feel like the kind of the transition information, um, has been a really long process. And I don't know what happened, and maybe it's because of everything with COVID, but I almost feel like we went from like, yeah, let's get into video, like hearing it for years and years and everybody just trying and get to all of a sudden everything is just video. So like for me, I would always, if I got a video, I'd be like, oh, why didn't you put this into like the text or, the content of the email so that I can just read it? Like, I don't feel like watching a video because then I have to make sure I can hear you. And now if somebody has a video, I've even like retrained, and now I'm like, oh yeah, let's hear. It's just like a more personal connection. And
Yeah.
then
Oh,
you can get the
absolutely.
tone of somebody's voice. So it just seems like we went to like really encouraging people for like 5 years to all of a sudden it's here. Like it's all video.
I mean, I think it adds to, I mean, we are the TikTok
Yeah.
generation, it was started with younger kids, and really I see people my age and older who are on TikTok. So I think
Yeah.
people are starting to really get used to, for better or for worse, they're used to like a video nugget to give them
Yeah.
information. And so, the bad is that there's not as much patience, right? Because we're
Yeah.
starting to get very, I can take ingest what you can give me in a minute and a half. And now
Mhm.
people are like, oh, a TikTok's really long if it's 3 minutes.
Mhm.
So it's an evolution. I
Yeah.
think, to me, it's better to be a 1-2 punch, so that it's
Yeah.
a discussion and or a video, so that there is that interpersonal, and then have the backup of the documents, so that, again, it's a
Mhm.
reference if anybody needs it. It's in writing, which is still the established way that everything's legal. So if
Mhm.
it's in writing, it's there. So again, you can't even say, well, I remember what they said on the video, because sometimes even that, You know, there have been a lot of cases recently just in our world where people said, I never said that. And you're like, but it's on
It's
video.
we have it. It's
Like
right
what?
here. Yeah.
But then you just sort of also get to pull it up in language, in writing. So we have that as well. But I think it's just an evolution of how we ingest information. And that's okay. It's okay. What's important is that we get the value across. I think there are a lot of people who think just because they're on video, they're conveying something. That's not the case.
Right.
It still has to be as succinct, concise, honest, straightforward language as it is if it's going to be written.
Yeah, and quick. So that's when I started trying to get into video a few years ago, and I was kind of bouncing some things off of some of the agents in my company, and they're, Angela, it's just too long. Angela, it's just too long. Like nobody's going to sit. And I had to be very diligent about, okay, I got to break this up into something separate because I'm just somebody, like if you could start talking to me about real estate, I could talk to you all day and I could just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So I usually, when I start, it's hard to stop because it's like, oh, but then I should mention this. Oh, I should mention this. So like kind of break it out and have just real small to keep, like 30 seconds, I feel like is, if you can't get it through.
And I think that's really interesting because when I first started video, I heard the same thing. People would always say, oh, it's got to be short. People can only ingest so much. However, the other side of the, I don't know, TikTok coin, if you will, is that people really spend a lot of time on YouTube, and YouTube videos are not always short. If people are interested, they are engrossed and they have no problem sitting for 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. So it's a combination. I think it's the person. I mean, when you sit down and you watch Netflix, most people are unhappy when an episode is only half an hour. They start to binge it so that they're watching 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think as far as, one of the reasons that I wanted to start having these types of conversations, and not that I'm the only person out there having this, so many people are having these same conversations. And that's why it's so important, because, there's a need for this type of talk. But the video, I started using it, I want to say 2 years ago with clients in email format during different points of the process. So you get a video from me before we meet. You get a video from me after we have our listing in place. You get a video from me after you have an accepted offer that just kind of summarizes with all of the things to expect. And it's a time saver, because when you're getting ahead and the content is already there and made, you've freed up that inevitable phone call. And it's not to try to replace that personal connection, but like, let's have that connection on things that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? And I think you're providing value by showing, I knew this was going to come up. So, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I like to do as well. I have a similar, and in fact, actually, I think all systems that can help both sides save time and be consistent are amazing. I'm working with we have a virtual assistant, and I'm working with her to create a workflow just for our Calendly. So when we have somebody who wants to speak, so sidebar is that I work with investors and do commercial work as well as some residential, obviously, as we all have the same license and we have that opportunity. When we have an investor given to us, we need to have a discussion with them that is sort of an intake to know what their interests are, what their experience is, where they're looking, all that kind of thing. So now what we're doing is having them make a time to speak with us, then having that send an email out to say, great, so glad you did. Sending an intake form out with that's fillable online, having that come back to us, having them get a reminder, having us get a reminder. Because before, for example, we would go back and forth for, email after email. What time can you go? I can't do that. I can't do this. I can't do that. None of it. It makes it so much easier. So any single thing, I believe, that can be automated and takes that time and allows both parties to use that time, like you said, to really delve into the relationship part is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned you have a team that you work with.
So I actually have a partnership
Okay.
in my work. We're at TLo Property Solutions, and that is my partner Peter. He and I had met a couple. I met a couple actually outside of one of the brokerages that we were at, and they were a lovely young couple. You know, every broker who says you should just talk to everybody, and I was like, well, that's me.
Yeah.
So I went out and said, can I help you? And nobody had bothered. Nobody had said anything to them, and I said, well, can I help you with anything? You know, just do you have any questions? Well, it turned out they were an Australian couple who had done all these incredible renovations and investments in Melbourne, and they were looking to come to the U.S. They had a green card and they wanted to come to the U.S. and do it. And I was like, great. And we just kept that relationship going. So when they did come, we started to do that with them. And a friend in the office said, you know, I know this, and this. Great. Can you help me with this? And we ended up being a partnership. And now at Coldwell Banker, we are working together because we have, I would say, mirror images of our skill set. So having been in media and public relations, that's more of my side. I'm a little more techie. Peter's more of the research and dives into the numbers. He literally, there is almost no street in our area, and we cover like 7 counties of New Jersey. There's almost no street or road that he doesn't say, oh, I know that. I showed a house there. I sold a house there, whatever it is. So the value of combined experiences and combined skill sets, I think that's really what hopefully the future of teamwork is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned you have a virtual assistant too.
Yeah, best thing we ever did.
Yeah.
I'll happily pass along the person who helped us with that. But, you know, did a lot of research, went online, had a really great meeting with somebody who is basically a talent pool recruiter. And she connected us with a wonderful person. She's in South Africa. You know, once we finally got sort of the timing down of time zones and daylight savings, but she's, yeah, it's really something.
Yeah.
But she's amazing. And that is the same thing we're saying, actually, Ange, is that it's about making sure that you are using your time the best you can. So all these things that we could be doing, it's not like you're not capable of figuring out how to run your Google Calendar, but is that in your best interest? Is it in your client's best interest? No. It'd be so much better to either be with them, be prospecting for them, or be educating yourself. I mean, you know well that real estate is amazing and that there's endless amounts of education, whether it's, you know, stuff we have to do for continuing ed or their opportunities or on your own. I mean, there's all sorts of education on your own. So for me, I'd much rather be doing that and or networking than the nitty gritty, not because I can't, but because it doesn't serve.
Right. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. So when you started and you first got your license, you started working in residential and then transitioned into commercial?
Yeah, commercial and investment. So again, for us in New Jersey, there's no difference in our license. So when I started as a low person on the totem pole, which was kind of a relief. I was the lowly buyer agent for one of the really successful teammates. And what it did was allow me to learn everything without somebody sort of breathing down my neck, asking me to make sure I have a certain amount of transactions or to produce. And so I was able to really go slowly and learning all the nitty gritty. And that's when I say I can do it, because I learned it. And it's like learning from the mailroom up. Right. But I didn't really want to stay on a team if I couldn't start to promote myself and my skill set and what I wanted to do. And so that was sort of how I generated my world into being a single agent. That was in residential and it happened. But then I started to I was doing a lot of social media and I started to get people interested who were investors. And that led to both residential investment, but again, in New Jersey, at least, our commercial is anything that's 4 units and over, or mixed use is commercial, or, you know, if we have like a small retail. So it doesn't necessarily have to be industrial or warehouse for it to be commercial. So it's been a really interesting transition into, but also sort of not being jack of all trades, because I don't think that's fair to clients, but being able to pivot when people need it. I had an investor recently who wanted a 3-family. We worked on that, and then he turned and said, well, but actually I want to sell my house. And we're like, great, we can do that.
Yeah.
So I think
It
it's really
sounds like that
important to be a
happened
service
organically.
provider.
It just kind of, was there any strategic, thought in there where it's like, okay, maybe this is where I go because.
I think at some point I thought about that, and my company is definitely open to it. There's this world of what we call resimercial, where
Mhm.
people do both commercial and residential. There are a lot of commercial people who would say, no, never, you need to focus. And I think for certain areas of commercial, that's absolutely true. I think if
Sure.
you are doing all heavy industrial, you probably really need to focus on that. But if
Right.
you're doing a combination of properties that are both commercial and residential, or they're smaller commercial, or they're a different level of commercial, it's valuable to have both. And yes, it was organic for me. I think, again, we have the right and the opportunity to learn so much. So
Mhm.
once I was starting to become interested in the commercial, I've really reached out to mentors and to my
Yeah.
brokerage and said, here, I'm going to need some more help with this. What can you do? My office broker is amazing, and she had been an investor herself before she was a broker.
Mhm.
And her husband's actually a commercial agent. So we've got, like, right in our office, this breadth and wealth of information. And then on top of that, add people in Coldwell Banker Realty locally, Coldwell Banker
Mhm.
National. I mean, we just have this breadth of information. So
Yeah.
it's accessible to us.
I was going to say having that larger support or resources available to you must be helpful when transitioning something new, something
Oh,
unknown.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, for me, I never speak poorly of anything. I think if boutique real estate agencies are amazing for what they do, there are other larger brokerages that do what they
Mhm.
do. I just happen to find that it's incredibly helpful to have the combination. What I feel like I have at Coldwell Banker is the best of both worlds, where I have very intimate relationships with the people locally and my fellow
Mhm.
agents, my admin, my broker, but we also have access to really the higher ups. I mean, I'm very good friends with one of our regional vice presidents because she was so open to being available to me.
Yeah.
That means the world to me, but it also speaks well of a company that really does believe in its agents. And then as a result, listens and says, okay, what do you need? How do we get that to you? What do we do for you? And
Mhm.
when you have that kind of backing, you really have the world is your oyster, because there's just umpteen things you can do
Yeah.
with it, and it's ours to learn or not.
Right. So when you transitioned from working as part of the initial team as a buyer's agent and then going
Yeah,
out to be a single agent, um, how did you know? And I asked this because I've been spending a lot of my time recently trying to put together resources and information to help new agents turn like a part-time real estate career into full-time, and
yeah.
making that shift and making that transition, or even just making the jump into getting into it, is sometimes the hardest thing to try to balance. And so I'm curious, what how did you know you were ready? Was there something that happened, or did you meet like a financial goal that you had before you, or was it more ambition? Like, okay, and now I've got to do my own thing.
I think it was a combination, quite honestly, Angela.
Mhm.
I mean, I let me admit fully, though, when I first started working for myself, I chased every shiny penny. And as you well know, everybody's marketing to agents saying, if you do this, you'll have tons of business. If you do this, you'll have tons of business. If you do this, you'll
Mhm.
have tons of
Right.
business. And so many of them were things that were really exciting and amazing. And I sort of chased that and chased that. And so once I sort of went, okay, not everything's going to work. There are some things that are tried and true, and there's some things that I'm willing to be innovative about.
Yeah.
But I think because I was so curious and so interested, I was able to go into it with so much excitement that I wasn't looking left and right to think, what else might I be doing? I was thinking, this is great. This is so fascinating to me. And I was eating it up. So as you're kind of doing that, the ball is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and rolling faster and faster. And so now, I was like full in and doing it full time. I think one of the things that younger and or newer agents forget to do is really assess who they are. And I'll give an example. I was at an event over the summer, and there was a young, very attractive woman who, younger than I was to a great degree, and had been relatively new to the industry, but she was frustrated. And she said, I'm just not getting listings. I'm just not doing it. And I said, well, let's talk about, what are you doing? What are you doing? She was very attractive. She was very well spoken. She was also Asian, and she was a golfer. And I said, are you telling everyone that you're a golfer? Are you out there? She's like, no. I said, okay, enough. Who you are is who you are. And who you are is what you do with your business. And so once we started to sort of talk about that, she realized, like, if she could be excited about doing the things she loves and who she is, that would translate into how she does her business for real estate. I grew up dancing in New York City. Like, we were way too young to be at clubs, but we started, and that was the end. Like, we were always at clubs, had such a fun time. And at one point somebody was like, why don't you dance? And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I did, and it was super fun. And I got really known to be the agent with moves. And, then TikTok came along, and I was like, I don't know. I don't think I can compete with those people. They're doing some major stuff. But it really did it was fun for me, but it was also very much who I am, one side of me at least. Like, there's that facet of really liking the fun and the physical and being out there and loving music and all that. And I think that it doesn't matter what the business is, but of course we're in real estate. But if you're in a business and you're showing who you are authentically, I think that's something to really help newer agents engage, because it's hard not to be excited about things you love. And then you come to everything with that attitude. And when you bring that to your work, that's it. That's literally everything.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was actually just having a similar conversation with agents in my office a couple weeks ago, probably not last week. And what we were talking about is the choice between having like a personal social media page and then a business social media page. And I just have one. I have a page for our company, but I don't have a separate Angela Calais Realtor page. It's just Angela Calais. You see what you get, and this is it. And there were some agents who said, my goal isn't to be my client's friend. I'm not looking to, create that type of relationship. And, I said, it's not about continuing a friendship. It's about, I just think it's so important to not pretend as though real estate is our life. It is part of who we are. It's not who we are, right? So, and I think it creates more of a realistic version of what being a realtor and just being a person is. Because when you're in a transaction with somebody and you maybe don't answer a text in 2 hours, but they can see that, oh, she's been selling this house, she's been in this business, but she's also going to the football game and she's going to the softball game, and it's more understanding when they can see, oh, she's working, but she's also got these other things going on. It's just more understandable and relatable. And
I think
I'm an advocate of having just the one social media and just, it's all real estate is a part of who we are. Right. So showing people the whole picture.
I mean, I actually really love the national campaign that we had called Who We Are, and it was the registered trademark of R. I thought it was cool because, just to your point, like, who we are is not just being realtors. It's part of who we are. But being a realtor, I found out, and this is what I did really love about going into it, is it is sort of everything and it is sort of not, right? So the fact that you are out at football games, you're not out at football games to be a realtor. You're out at football games. You also happen to be a realtor.
Mm-hmm.
You are, because your kid's playing. That's who you are. And that's how people know you. But you're right, it's genuine. And I will say, I think that one of the important things is to have boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in the middle of a transaction, I mean, I know what it's like. Because I've been a buyer and seller, I want somebody to be able to be reached
Yeah.
all the time. But if I'm not, I don't think it's fair for people to not have boundaries for their own work, because then it's the same with like raising kids. You have to have the boundaries so people respect that when you're giving your time to them,
Mm-hmm.
it is devoted to them.
Right.
But by the same token, they understand that if you're not with them, then you must be devoting as much time and as much energy to that other person or thing. And that's your value. That when
Right.
you're there for them.
Yeah.
And when you're not, it's because you're there as much for something or someone else.
Yeah.
And that's to your credit. Right.
Yeah.
But even with my partner, we have, as mentioned, Calendly. I was saying to him, let's set it up so we have days that we know that people can reach us. And he said, well, I'm really worried because, what if people have other times? And I said, well, they will, and they'll probably tell us we can't reach you because your times. And then maybe we're happy to talk to them and adjust. But if people know when they can reach us,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not a question. Are they reachable every week? Oh, yeah. Are they reachable every few days? Yeah, we have 4 days that is on the calendar. Plus, obviously, if we're available during the weekend to show people things, or we have an open house, but at least it's sort of consistent. And then they know they have that.
So tell
I
me
think
about
that's great.
Calendly, because I've heard that name before, but I'm not familiar with it. So what are the benefits that you find using that software?
Calendly is fantastic. What it is a system where you can send out a link and somebody can then see your calendar. So say you want them to meet with you and you say, please check out my link. They go to Calendly and they see that you're available from Tuesday. The slot is 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're like, oh, great, I'm open at 4 as well. Click. And they take that appointment. So it's basically their own appointment making.
Very cool.
But you get to devise what the schedule is. And obviously we're not all available all the time. And that's I think the important thing. The other thing that's really valuable is when people see, wow, you're really busy. That can be really good. I mean, you're busy because you're doing good work and you've got people to talk to. And either you're out with your family or your hobbies or whatever, or you're working with a lot of people. And don't we all really be don't we all want to be working with the people who are really successful?
Right.
Don't we all want to be working with the people who are out there learning, knowing they're doing the transactions over and over, and so that they know they're the expert in the area. So it's kind of interesting to see when people are really booked. You're like, wow. And again, it's sort of like, the restaurants that open and they can't possibly see you for a month. Yeah. Everyone wants to be there. It's like, it's a little bit of that where you're like, sorry, I really can't see you till next Monday. Yeah. People will wait till next Monday.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? I found that too. And there's been times where, I've said, I'm really, unfortunately, the next time I'm available is in 2 weeks. It's this day and this time. I have a great team. I'm certainly happy to have one of them meet with you sooner. If timing is important to you, and if timing is not of the most importance, I'm happy to meet with you at this time. And there are times where they say, you know what, I get listed on Friday. It's like, okay, that's not going to work for me, but I know this agent is going to jump at that opportunity and she's going to work her butt off. So that's just going to be a better fit.
Yeah, I think it's really about helping each other know what your opportunities are. And so again, it's all about respect. And because we are all so busy. I mean, that is the reality of the American life, right? We're so busy. If it's not with kids or social or work or whatever, we're all so busy. So the thing is, you're always trying to make relationships by finding the place that you come together. And that's that time. Yeah. And so to be able to look at it and say, oh, great, that time for her works for him. And I don't know, there's something really valuable about that. And it is so it really helps with your own time management because, again, you're not back and forth. Well, how about Tuesday? Nah, I can't do
Yeah.
Tuesday. How about
Like, here it
Wednesday? No,
is. Yeah.
it's right there. So
Yeah.
I highly recommend it to everyone. I think there's a free version, as there are in so many apps that
Mhm.
everybody in sales or everybody in real estate can use, but there are benefits. And one is this workflow where it's like, if we pay up and it's not that expensive, it's not even $15 a month. I think that your workflow is that somebody schedules with you, and then they get an email to confirm it, and you get an email that they have done it, and then there's a reminder, because we all know everybody forgets, even if they
Yeah.
mean well, and it goes on their calendar, and all these great things that automate it and make it very easy for us to show up. And that is half the battle rate of everything we all do, and especially in real estate. Show up.
Yeah.
Be there
Yeah.
and be there on time and be available when you are. And I've said, I'm available here. I'm here.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. Anything you can
Yeah.
add an automation to and make things simpler and more streamlined, you got to do it.
Oh yeah.
Because
Oh,
anything else could happen in this business that's going to throw you for a loop. So whatever we can control, let's control that.
put it in there. By the same token, I mean, I will say, and I know you feel this way too, it's like, it's a balance, because we don't want to ever, there are people who, like, they'll schedule out their social media really far in advance. And I get it. I understand. And to some extent we should, but gosh, like, you would hate it if, I don't know, you put a social media post out about how, I don't know, how great something is about trees, and then there was just a forest fire, but you didn't
Right.
change your social media to reflect that. So it's so obvious that you're completely out of touch. So
Yeah.
it's valuable to have them, and it's valuable to balance it. So whatever you can, that's never really going to harm or foul, then yeah. And then
Yeah.
if there is stuff that's got to have a human touch, again, that goes back to what you were saying, like, give yourself the time to do the things that are really meaningful, that
Mhm.
nobody else can do for you. Nobody can truly follow up with a client the way you can.
Yeah.
They're working with you. They don't really want your
Mhm.
third person in the office. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they don't want to work with them if that person's the transaction manager, and right now they're trying to just get documents and all that. If they have a personal issue, they want to talk to you. I don't want to
Yeah.
be like, well, I'm sorry, I was busy doing social media for everybody else.
Right.
Whoa, that would be
Yeah.
awful.
Right.
So that's part of it, is just really automate where you can, so that you can have the time to have the relationships in the areas that it's really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, if you're doing the relationship part right, then the future business will be organic from the relationship building, and social media is kind of a
Yeah,
necessary aside.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I also think that you can hear me still, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's a one sidebar for anyone who's watching. You may or may not think it's funny. Of the many things that aren't, my ears are tiny. And
Oh.
so I really should be on headphones like yours, so they never are in ear, because they're always like falling out, because I have a small ear canal.
Sure. Oh,
Eh.
that's funny.
Oh, my kids are always like, you can't hear anything. I'm like, well,
I
they're
say that to
small.
my
What can
mom
I
too.
say? That's just selective
Just
thinking,
get
kids.
your hearing
You don't
back.
need to know about that. That's because I don't know if I always want to know what you're asking. But
Yeah.
anyway,
For sure. And
yeah,
I know you are passionate about talking to women about financial literacy, right? So that's like
yeah,
is that something that you work into your real estate business, or is that something you do on the side? Or tell me what
sure.
brings you to this.
Yeah,
Um,
this is sort of my pet project. I was divorced last year, and I had an ex who was on Wall Street. He was really great with numbers, and that's not what my background was. And
Mhm.
even though it wasn't like I wasn't unknowledgeable about what was going on, but that wasn't my area of expertise. And so it became sort of his wheelhouse.
Sure.
I knew that as we were getting separated, that there was going to be a real learning curve for me about what I would need to know in order to handle my life on my own.
Mhm.
And it was true. And what I did was use advisors, and I was very lucky that I had the opportunity, and I knew people who could help me. But it made me recognize how there are a lot of people who don't have financial literacy, men and women, but as I was doing more of the research, finding out that women who are separating and divorcing, they tend to lose about 30% of their financial solvency when they go through a divorce or separation, whereas men actually, and again, my situation is just heterosexual. That's the only thing I can speak of, but
Sure.
it's partners, right? There are partners. If there's one partner who's been at an office and the other one's home, it doesn't matter who it is, but often one partner is not as financially involved or literate. So we're finding that people, as they separate, one person tends to suffer. And in the case of my knowing other women, that has been, and honestly, I really thought when I first was doing it that if I said this to people, it would only be women who weren't well educated in general. It would be women who maybe were of a different socioeconomics, or they hadn't had great, institutional education. No, not at all. It's a discussion I've had with women who have been the heads of Sony Pictures. I've had discussion, like with people who are in HR. I've had people who are in finance themselves, but they don't handle the finance at home. So it's really interesting to discuss financial literacy with women about their lives, if they're children, because they're ones that pass that along. And also to bring in the discussion of investment in real estate. Real estate traditionally is not as big an asset class for people in general when they're investing. And then secondarily, not when women are investing. They're not often encouraged to invest in real estate the way males are, or more men and their portfolios. There aren't as many women who are realtors in investment real estate. I mean, just sort of on and on and on. And I was like, well, then that needs to be discussed. And as I've offered that to people, I've just gotten tons of interest. I've done podcasts on it and really starting to get going. I have a friend who's at a large American bank who's like, we want to do a whole presentation on it that can kind of be rolled out. So the fact that people are yearning for that information, it was incredible to strike a chord.
Yeah. And I feel like, and that's for all women or people in general, but for realtors who are responsible for, independent contractors, I know there's a trend to maybe go another direction, but right now, independent contractors responsible for their own taxes and, not having that 401k or pension that's lined up, is really planning for the future. Is you can be creative or, go down a very, traditional line, but it's difficult to especially make a transition if you're coming from a very corporate salaried type position.
I mean, anyone who's a 1099, and we're in an area, again, out of New York, we have not just obviously realtors, all sorts of managers, money managers who actually can't, they're 1099s, they're on commission. We also have a lot of creatives here. We have actors, artists, they all
unknown
as self-employed
or cyclical, and
exactly, self-employed, unknown income, commission-based income, all of that is it's really something, and it's not what we learn about in school, if we learn at all. In New Jersey, just in the past, I think 10 years, created a requirement for high schoolers that they have a financial literacy course. But in all fairness, my kids who are pretty good at it, they actually just did that course over the summer on the computer, not really paying that much attention to it. They were like, we just want to pass. It didn't mean that much to them. So the traditional education about finances, limited as that is, it certainly doesn't take into account people who are self-employed. And that's a real shame, because a lot of people are or will be. And, I know a lot of realtors who do very well and they have nothing in the bank. But it makes sense. You're just spending money because you have it. And if nobody's teaching you what parameters are going to be helpful, And the other thing about realtors, again, my experience with this group, are very high eyes, right? If you're doing your personality tests, high eyes are really like big personalities. They're out open. They're like the big picture, very, very theatrical, very good at networking, but are they good at the details? I'm not. And so many people I know, they're not. They don't want to, they're like, I can't be bothered with those little nitty gritty things called numbers in my account. They're like, so it's just not like as conducive to our industry to be as
Yeah.
financially literate. So it's just been a really interesting discussion, and people are very open to it.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how I took it. And I do believe in real estate and the importance of that. I really believe in women, especially as moms, because they are going to translate how they respond to money to their kids, whether they mean
Right.
to or not. And I think that if we have issues in our economy, why are we looking at the disease? We're not looking, excuse me, the symptoms and not the disease. Let's look at the disease. If we have issues where people don't know how to handle their money, we got to
Yeah.
figure out how to help them handle their money, not just, hand money. And I don't
Right.
mean that in any social comment. I mean that that's not teaching anyone anything. It's just not. And so let's do that along with it. Whatever we can do to help each other, that's great. And I want that. But I also want to help people because at some point they've got to stand on their own 2 feet, or they
Right.
may find themselves standing on their own 2 feet. And it's horrible to be like, okay, now what?
Yeah. Well, and not only that too, but money, I feel like, is one of the largest stressors that people have. It's going to contribute every time, when you go to the store, when you have an unexpected expense come up, or the kids need this, or
Yeah.
and I was talking to somebody the other day that was reminding me of a statistic I read, or I read lots of books, but that finances are like the number one contributor to relationship issues, like husband and wife and spouses and partners and things like that. Is it's all based on
Number one.
finances.
Number one, people
Yeah.
fight about money and sex. Like
Yeah.
that's really when it comes down to it. And there are a couple other things that are like the major things in life, like moving, which is also why we realtors are really important, right? Because we're there
Yeah.
for the one big crisis thing. But
Right.
money is huge. And people often come to it in relationships having different attitudes from their family, having different knowledge bases, having different experiences. And so, yeah, it's incredibly important. And if I hadn't had somebody say to me, like, look, you're going to be a realtor now, you need to understand that this is different. This
Yeah.
is going to be a different kind of ride. I wouldn't have really known. And so it's invaluable to be honest about it. And back to your point, when we're authentic about the reality, it's scary. I mean, believe me,
Mm-hmm.
I was like the person who, if I got an email that said something about like your bank account, I would be like, okay, I'll mark it as red, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to go through it. Like
I
I'm going
don't
to put my head
actually
into
want
the
to see
sand.
that. I'm gonna.
I don't want to know. It was like your FICO scores in. And even though I knew it was stronger than most, I was like, what now? I'm not even going to look. That head in the sand thing is very easy to do. And it was really easy to do with a spouse who was like handling it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But it wasn't good for the relationship for me to be
Right.
doing that. And it wasn't good for the relationship that we didn't have a really authentic discussion about his attitude towards money. I mean, honestly, for me, it was like a big thing in my relationship. His attitude was very contained. Like he really was about holding the money.
Yeah.
And my attitude, it wasn't about the spending. It was about being free and sharing and contributing and donating. And that caused a lot of animosity. So yeah, absolutely. It has to be spoken about. And it's something we should be thinking about from the get-go.
Yeah. And taking control of that, I think has a very functional purpose. And then also that mental health. That should be at the number one on your list, especially coming into a new year. Taxes are coming up and you're setting your financial goals for the next year, sales goals, things like that. This is a great time for people to really start looking into that and taking control of that.
Yeah. And there really isn't a good excuse for not. I mean, we all can sort of say that, but again, going back to all the opportunities, Facebook groups, YouTube channels that are all about it. There are umpteen thousand books and websites and opportunities, and that can get overwhelming. I do understand that. That's why I sort of talk to people on a simple level of let's start discussing it and see where maybe your deficit is in terms of knowledge. And then who can you go to? Where can you learn about it? What do you need to learn? But at least if we're saying, okay, we need to talk about this, it's like getting over the hump of something that's been sort of hush hush. And it's kind of like, women's age. You used to not tell people how old you were.
Yeah.
And then, it was like, oh, you couldn't talk about money. We should talk about money. We should talk about money. We should talk about it within every aspect of it, from youth and what's appropriate when kids are younger, to when you're single, to when you're with somebody, to when you're not with somebody, to when you're, late in life is important too. People don't think about it for their, getting ready for their passing. There are just so many levels where it's really valuable and important to know about.
Yeah, I agree. So where can people find you, Kat?
So I am at, first of all, Coldwell Banker. So if you need me, Coldwell Banker Realty in New Jersey, Summit, New Jersey. But my team is TLo Property. So we're at tloproperty.com. I'm very proud to say my daughter actually did my website. She's a really incredible graphic designer.
Oh, awesome.
She was able to put that up. And then also Kat.Timpson at Coldwell, CB Moves, really. Kat.Timpson at CB Moves, or Kat at TLo Property. So I do both. I'm in sort of the both range, and that's great. And I know you'll have that in some of the show notes. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Kat. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I hope you have a great holiday season as we're getting to the end of the year here, coming up fast. But you have so much information to share, and I really, really appreciate it and enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me. And if you have any other questions, please reach out. But it was great. And thank you for doing this. It's important to have the conversations.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. If you have found value in these episodes, please be sure to share and subscribe. I have so much more in store with guests that I can't wait to learn from.